Now there is further evidence of the spread of hantavirus on board a cruise ship after a French passenger tested positive for the disease while being repatriated. Her condition is said to be deteriorating. The World Health Organization says 7 people have now been confirmed with the Andes strain of the virus and another 2 are suspected. The ship is moored off the Spanish island of Tenerife. Here's our correspondent Vincent McAvenny.
It was the end of a very long and stressful journey as they pulled into Arrow Park Hospital. None of those on board had symptoms, but the UK authorities weren't taking any chances. The 20 British nationals, as well as a German resident of the UK and a Japanese national, will spend 72 hours here on the Wirral being tested. And then, if all is well, they'll self-isolate either at hospital accommodation or at home for 6 weeks.
We're going to be testing them very extensively, looking for any presence of the virus. So people will remember PCR testing from COVID days, so we'll be using that to look for the virus, and also checking their blood for the presence of antibodies that might suggest they've been exposed to it during the cruise or previously.
The MV Hondius dropped anchor off this port in Tenerife on Sunday morning, with the passengers having spent weeks at sea, with the hantavirus outbreak confirmed on board and the news that 3 of their fellow passengers had died. And so the complex operation to get people off began. First by small boat transfer, as they were ferried ashore in full protective gear. Then, with their belongings specially wrapped, they were put on buses, with a thumbs up and a wave from these British passengers. And finally, they were on their way home, with this special charter flight taking them to Manchester Airport. Arrow Park Hospital has experience of this kind of thing. Back in 2020, it took in the British nationals evacuated from Wuhan, China, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. But hospital bosses also recognise that those memories may cause local anxiety.
The fact that we were the isolation centre for COVID, for the coronavirus, before it was a pandemic, that may trigger some people to feel more anxious about what that might mean. But really, this is an understood, known virus that that can be managed appropriately, and so it's very, very different.
But the latest news from the US will be of concern. Of the 17 US nationals who'd been on board the ship now back in America, one is said to have mild symptoms and another has tested positive. Meanwhile, British paratroopers have landed on Tristan da Cunha to assist a UK national who had disembarked the cruise on the remote mid-Atlantic island and who now has symptoms of the virus. Oxygen was among the supplies airdropped to him, as stocks on the island are critically low. Vincent McAvenny, BBC News.
Well, let's go live to our correspondent Guy Hedgecoe, who's in Tenerife. And Guy, tell us a little more about this latest French passenger and the concern around her.
Well, that's right. This French passenger started showing symptoms yesterday on the flight from Tenerife, where I am, to Paris while she was being repatriated. She subsequently tested positive for the hantavirus, and she is now under observation. Now, the authorities here and the World Health Organization have said that that's not necessarily unusual. The WHO actually told the BBC that we can expect more cases, that wouldn't necessarily be a shock. The important thing is to treat them with the correct protocol. That is to observe the correct quarantine, which is 42 days, and in particular the first few days to have close observation of the person affected.
I was just reading the very latest from the US authorities about their repatriation. They are saying 16 of those passengers are in Nebraska, 2 are in Atlanta. And I suppose all the focus now is on the tracing and isolation that has to now follow.
Yes, that's right. And although the authorities have been keen to play down the comparisons with COVID, that of course does bring up memories of the pandemic, because that was exactly what was happening at the beginning of the pandemic and for much of the time that it was affecting the world. So the authorities are very keen to trace all people who had any kind of contact with the passengers on the Hondius boat. It's right behind me here in the port in Tenerife still. The passengers are due to complete their disembarkation today. But of course, that's not the end of the story, because anyone who's had any contact with the passengers or who was on board the boat earlier in its voyage, who then disembarked, they have to be traced and tracked. And it was an international group of people who are on board that boat, 23 nationalities. That makes tracking and tracing quite a complex matter. But the authorities say that they're going to pursue it, and it can be done in a rigorous and thorough way.
Guy Hedgecoe there in Tenerife, thanks very much, and apologies for the slight break-up on that line.